All right, so today's guided notes are on two-step algebraic equations. So again, this is like our other assignment. We're gonna walk through why we did what each step and explain step 1 over here, and we're gonna explain step 2 over here. All right, so our original problem is 9x minus 7 is equal to negative 25. Our very first step is always to undo what is not with our variable. And so what's not with our variable, we kind of cover that up and we say minus 7. Well, to undo minus 7, I'm going to do the inverse of add 7. By doing that, these two are now canceled because it leaves us with 0. We bring down our 9x, which we have not used. Okay, and on this side, we're also going to add 7 to because we want to keep our equation balanced. So negative 25 plus 7 is going to give us a negative 18. So step 1, we did the inverse operation of subtract 7 by adding 7. We added 7 to both sides to ensure that we kept our equation balanced. All right, step 2, we now have 9x is equal to negative 18. And remember, we said 9x says 9 times x. To undo that or do the inverse, we're going to do 9 divided by 9, which leaves us with 1x, which isolates the variable. Over here, we're going to end up doing negative 18 divided by 9, which gives us a negative 2. So for step 2, what we would explain that we did is we did the inverse of multiplying 9 times x by dividing by 9 on both sides. We did it to both sides to ensure that our equation was balanced. All right, so question number 2 says 6 is equal to x divided by 4 plus 2. Again, when we are trying to solve for x or the variable, we want to do what is not with our variable. So 4x divided by 4 is together, so we want to look at this plus 2. The inverse of plus 2 would be subtract 2. So over here, for our explanation of what we did in step 1, we did the inverse of adding 2 by subtracting 2. We then went to the left side and subtracted 2 as well to ensure that our equation was balanced. As we've talked about multiple times, we want to make sure that we always, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. All right, so when we subtract 2 over here, we are left with 0, so we don't even have to write it. We can kind of cross it off. We are left with x divided by 4, so we bring it down. Over here, to the left, we're actually going to do our subtraction of 6 minus 2, which gives us 4. All right, step 2. Now we have x divided by 4. The inverse of divide by 4 would mean that we're going to multiply by 4. Now, when I multiply by 4, again, I'm going to make that a fraction, so that way it looks the same. I multiply straight across, I end up with 4x over 4, which is equal to 1x. And there is my 1x rewritten. Now, if I do the inverse of dividing by multiplying by 4, I also want to multiply by 4 on the left-hand side. So we're left with 4 times 4, which is 16. So step 2 over here, we're going to say that we are multiplying by 4, which is the inverse of dividing by 4. That isolated our variable to get 1x, and we did it to the left-hand side to ensure that our equation stayed balanced. All right, question number 3. Question number 3 says 9x plus 1 is equal to negative 80. So again, we kind of cover up the variable and we want to get rid of this plus 1. So in order to undo or do the inverse of add 1, we're going to subtract 1. And if I subtract 1 on the left-hand side, I want to make sure I do it to the right-hand side. 1 minus 1 is 0, so we bring down what we haven't used, which is the 9x. And negative 80 minus 1 is the same as saying negative 80 plus negative 1, which is negative 81. Okay, so now I have 9x is equal to negative 81. So in order to undo 9x, or 9 times x, I'm going to divide by 9. I'm going to divide by 9 on both sides. 9 divided by 9 gives me 1x. And negative 81 divided by 9 gives me a negative 9. So step 2 here, we did the inverse operation of multiplying by 9 by dividing by 9. And we did it to the left-hand side to ensure that our equation stayed balanced. All right, last one. 0 is equal to 4 plus x divided by 5. All right, so our first step is, again, we're going to get rid of, or we're not going to get rid of, but we're going to hide our variable. And we want to look at 4, and we want to get rid of that positive 4. So the inverse of positive 4 would mean that we're going to subtract 4, or think about it as a negative 4. So when I do that, 4 minus 4, I get 0, so they cancel out. And then I want to make sure I also do it to the left-hand side to ensure that I keep my equation balanced. So 0 minus 4 gives me a negative 4. All right, so step 1, we did the inverse of a positive 4 by subtracting 4, or a negative 4. We did it to the left-hand side to keep our equation balanced. Moving to step 2, we are left with x divided by 5 is equal to negative 20. Or sorry, I jumped ahead. Negative 4 on this side. Now, I'm going to do the inverse of divide by 5, which means I'm going to multiply by 5. And when I do that, I get 5x over 5, which is the same as saying 5x divided by 5, which is 1x. So our x is then isolated. It's all by its lonesome. And negative 4 times 5, we get negative 20. So to clarify, our steps on the second part is we did the inverse of divide by 5 and multiplied by 5. We multiplied by 5 to get our x isolated. And when we did that, we wanted to also do it to the left-hand side to ensure that we kept our equation balanced. So x is then equal to negative 20. All right, the whole time I was going through these explanations, I kind of explained what was happening. For your final question here, explain what is happening on the side with the variable. So the whole time that we're working with the side with the variable, we are trying to isolate the variable. We're undoing or using inverse operations to get that variable by itself. On the side of the equation without the variable, we are doing the math and making sure that our equation stays balanced, which ultimately solves what that variable is equal to ensure that our equation is true. All right, guys, I hope that helps. As you go through and write your steps, make sure you're detailed as if you were teaching it to someone else. Thanks, guys.